What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to InvestQ. And we're going to be looking at the space sector. And talking about the space sector, we haven't made a video covering any space companies in probably ever since the SpaceX IPO happened, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been quite a few weeks, and there's been lots of recent developments that we've been seeing over the past week, such as earnings reports that we've seen that have came out for some of the companies we're going to talk about. There's also been new contracts that have been awarded to some of these companies. There's been acquisitions, satellite deployments, and some companies have even had major increases in their backlog as well. And we're going to continue to see the lines between commercial space, defense, intelligence, and artificial intelligence become increasingly there's going to be lots of developments we're going to talk about regarding these things. So instead of focusing on just one thing or just one company like I did in the last video for Redwire, we're going to be looking at 5 different space stocks. All of them we have covered in the past, but we're going to revisit them after some time from not covering them for a few weeks now. And the stocks that I want to cover today are in the thumbnail, but the actual names of them would be Rocket Lab, which you do see on the screen right now. We're going to talk again about Redwire. We're going to talk about Intuitive Machines, Black Sky, and last but not least would be Planet Labs. And what makes this video interesting to me is that these companies, they give investors exposure to very different parts of the space economy. So we're going to break down the latest developments we have seen in these companies, and we're going to then talk about what I think all of this tells us about the direction of the broader space industry. And really quick, before we get into the video, the channel has officially reached the first goal of monetization, where now, if you'd like, and if you do enjoy the content and want to support InvestQ directly, you can hit the join button below and check out the different membership options. Absolutely no pressure, but I really appreciate everyone supporting the channel. So now let's get into the video. The first company we're going to be talking about is arguably the biggest company on today's list right now, and that's none other than Rocket Lab. And speaking of Rocket Lab, what happened yesterday is they reported their Q2 for 2026 results. And from a growth standpoint, there was quite a bit to like, because as we look at the headline and we look at the numbers here, you're going to see here first off starting that revenue came in at $234 million, which is a 62% increase year over year. And revenue also came in ahead of approximately $231.6 million the consensus estimate. Now, the company did report an EPS loss of approximately 8 cents per share, which was slightly wider than roughly the 6-cent loss that analysts were expecting. But there's also another number from this report that really stood out to me, and that's none other than the backlog. And that backlog currently stands at $2.36 billion, which is a 137% increase year over year. And when we're talking about more than $2 billion of contracted business across the company and more than $1 billion in new launch and space system contracts that were reportedly signed during and after the quarter. Now, as I always say when discussing backlog, keep in mind that backlog is not the same thing as immediately recognized revenue. We've talked about this numerous times. I believe I mentioned also in the Redwire video previous. I've definitely mentioned in Big Bear AI videos, and I've also talked about it in many CTM videos. Because at the end of the day, even when the backlog increases, execution still matters, because programs can move around and revenue recognition can take time. But it gives us visibility into the amount of business that Rocket Lab has been accumulating. And that backlog is becoming increasingly important because Rocket Lab isn't simply a launch company anymore. Now, I also think that this is one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding the company Rocket Lab, because people hear Rocket Lab and they immediately just come to the conclusion and just think about rockets. Now, obviously, launches remain extremely important, but the company has built a much broader ecosystem, because Rocket Lab provides many things such as satellite platforms, spacecraft components, solar solutions, and other infrastructure used throughout the space economy. So rather than simply getting paid whenever Electron launches, Rocket Lab is increasingly participating in multiple parts of a space mission. And if management can continue scaling both sides of the company, that makes the long-term story much more interesting. But then we have to transition over and get to the elephant in the room, which is Neutron. And Neutron is Rocket Lab's next generation medium lift rocket. And this could dramatically, and I mean dramatically, expand the market Rocket Lab is capable of addressing. And management also says that Neutron remains on track for pad delivery during the fourth quarter of 2026. However, the company does acknowledge that the window for completing an inaugural test flight before the end of the year is narrowing. And this is important. And if you're asking why this is important, it's because investors have placed enormous amounts of expectations on Neutron. And developing a new rocket can be incredibly difficult. Delays are always a possibility, and technical problems are also usually also a big possibility as well. Now, until Neutron actually files successfully, execution risk remains significant. But we're also starting to see commercial demand developing before the rocket has even entered service. Now, Rocket Lab did recently sign. Its first dedicated commercial constellation launch agreement for Neutron with Kepler Communications, and with those launches expected to begin in 2028. And the company has unveiled something called Ghost. And Ghost is a globally deployable containerized launch system designed to support mobile, suborbital, and orbital launches beginning in 2027. Now, when you start thinking about the national security applications of rapidly deployable launch capabilities, this becomes another interesting piece of Rocket Lab's broader strategy. Now, looking ahead, management expects Q3 revenue of approximately $250 million to $265 million, which would represent another record quarter. However, GAAP gross margin is expected around 29% to 31%, partly due to a greater mix of lower margin satellite platform projects. So, Rocket Lab, they are growing pretty quickly. Actually, not even pretty quickly. That's understating it. It's extremely quickly at the rate that they're growing. And the backlog is absolutely enormous. But investors, they do need to watch margins and Neutron's execution very closely. Next company we're going to talk about, and I made a video on them yesterday, would be none other than Redwire. Let me just get this out of the way so I can get these tabs out the way. But, bye. Anyways, next company we have is Redwire, and I'm not going to spend quite as much time here because of the recent video I made yesterday. But the headline numbers do deserve another look because, as we mentioned, Redwire reported approximately $117.1 million in quarterly revenue, and that is approximately 89.6% year-over-year growth. And gross margins, they came in at around 27.8%, and backlog reached a record approximately $542.1 million. And quarterly bookings were approximately $165 million. So this is another space company showing extremely rapid top-line expansion. And what makes this company particularly interesting is how much the company has evolved, because following its expansion into edge autonomy, Redwire isn't simply a pure space infrastructure company anymore. It now has significant exposure to autonomous systems and unmanned aerial vehicles. So you've essentially got a company operating across both space and defense, and Redwire, they're continuing to expand its traditional space capabilities as alongside the other ways that they are expanding when it comes to defense. And the company has exposure to spacecraft components, sensors, structures, power systems, microgravity research, and other areas of space infrastructure. And they've even announced plans with SpaceMD for the first commercial SpaceX Starfall mission. And it's currently planned for 2028, involving pharmaceutical deployment in microgravity. And I did talk about it in the previous video. Feel free to check it out. And what I'm going to be watching with Redwire, again, because it's going to be all about execution. Because nearly 90% revenue growth does look incredible, and more than $500 million in backlog also looks incredible. But as Redwire becomes larger, I want to see that growth eventually translate into stronger profitability and cash generation. And that's ultimately what will determine whether the expansion creates long-term shareholder value. So Redwire's opportunity is huge, but execution remains extremely important. Now, let's move over to BlackSky, because this company literally just announced another contract as well. And the announcement came out on August 11th, and it announced it won a seven-figure multi-year international contract for combined assured and on-demand subscription services. And there is something about this contract that I think is more important than simply the dollar amount, because this customer initially participated in a pilot program. And following that pilot, the customer expanded its commitment into a multi-year agreement, and that's exactly the type of progression that you want to see. And the customer will receive integrated access to Gen 2 and Gen 3 imagery along with AI-enabled analytics. And under the agreement, the customer receives global coverage through an on-demand subscription, while also receiving priority access to imagery and analytics in specific areas through an assured subscription. And BlackSky specifically highlighted the combination of Gen 2's high-frequency monitoring with Gen 3's higher resolution imaging. And Gen 3 satellites are capable of approximately 35 centimeter imagery, and according to BlackSky, this can help support automated identification and classification of things like vehicles, aircraft, vessels, and other objects of military interest. And that is exactly where business becomes much more interesting than simply taking satellite pictures. Now, BlackSky, they do describe themselves as a real-time space-based intelligence company. And the company, it does combine its satellites with spectra tasking and analytic software. And I think the key word here is intelligence, because collecting imagery is one thing, but being able to rapidly collect imagery, analyze what's changed, and identify objects and provide that information to a government or military customer is significantly more valuable. And that brings artificial intelligence directly into the space investing thesis. Now, another thing to talk about BlackSky, again, because the newest contract also came shortly after BlackSky reported their second quarter results for 2026. And the company, it generated approximately $33.3 million in revenue, and the company's adjusted EBITDA came in at around $4.7 million. And I think I said this, but in case I didn't, the $33.3 million in revenue is roughly an increase of 50% year over year. And also, another good thing that came out of management was the fact that they did reaffirm its full year guidance. So the thing that I would watch with BlackSky going forward is whether this newest international contract becomes part of a broader pattern, because if they can continue getting customers into pilot programs, and other questions that investors will be asking is, can those pilots convert into larger multi-year agreements, and can Gen 3 drive higher value recurring subscription revenue? And if the answer eventually becomes yes for those specific questions, the business model gets very interesting, and that would really help the long-term thesis for shareholders of BlackSky, and it would give investors and shareholders more confidence to see that the business is going to continue to expand, it's going to continue to grow, and it's going to stay for the long term. Now, next company that I want to talk about would be regarding Intuitive Machines, ticker symbol LUNR, because most investors probably know Intuitive Machines because of its lunar missions. And the company became known for achieving the first US commercial soft landing on the moon. But the business is increasingly becoming much broader than lunar landers. And Intuitive Machines is building capabilities across lunar infrastructure, orbital delivery systems, satellite platforms, navigation and communications, and recently we've seen that strategy expand even further. Quick reminder before we continue, if you're enjoying the content and want to connect with the community, check out the first link below for the free InvestQ community. And if you want access to advanced stock research and tools, the second link is a Prophecy 7-day trial for just $7. And last, if you want daily market updates and behind the scenes content, follow me on Instagram using the third link in the description. Now, let's get back to the video. And on August 3rd, Intuitive Machines, ticker symbol LUNR, completed its strategic acquisition involving Goonhilly Earth Station and ComSat. And this is important because it expands Intuitive Machines' capabilities in communication infrastructure. And if the company wants to eventually become an end-to-end space infrastructure provider, communications are obviously an extremely important part of that equation. And landing something on the moon is one thing, but maintaining communications and transferring data between space and Earth is a whole other thing. And then just one day later, LUNR did announce how the company secured a subcontract with L3 Harris supporting spacecraft platforms for the Space Development Agency's Accelerated Missile Defense Tranche 3 mission. And let me just pull that up. August 4th, yeah, right there. Here we are. So yeah, and once again, we're seeing the exact same theme here regarding space, defense, national security, satellite infrastructure, and these industries are increasingly becoming interconnected. And Intuitive Machines also has another major catalyst coming very soon. Today is August 11th, so in 2 days from today, before the market opens on August 13th, they have their earnings call, and I'm assuming they'll also be reporting the actual earnings release and show the financial results right before their earnings call, because typically that's how it is. And during the earnings report, I'm going to be watching several things. I'm going to be watching to see revenue trends. I'm going to be looking for revenue regarding to the backlog, how much of that backlog has converted into realized revenue. I'm going to be checking out the profitability trends, the integration of recent acquisitions, and updates surrounding major national security programs. And management's outlook for the remainder of 2026. And the company has also secured an approximately $148.3 million NASA CLPS award in late June. So there's a lot happening here for LUNR. But with earnings only 2 days away, I don't think it makes sense to speculate too much. I'd just rather wait and see for what the actual numbers tell us. Now, finally, out of all the companies that we're talking about today, we have none other than Planet Labs. And Planet is another Earth observation company, but its strategy is somewhat different from BlackSky because Planet operates a massive fleet of Earth imaging satellites and provides geospatial data to commercial customers and governments. And recently, the company announced another interesting international expansion because on August 10th, Planet announced a partnership with the government of Rwanda. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Actually, no, this is the wrong. Let me get that out for you. Sorry. Planet Lab, August 10th, RWANDA. There we go. Yeah, here it is. So, Planet Lab on August 10th announced a partnership with the government of Rwanda to establish a national satellite data program. And the program is designed to use high-resolution satellite data to support areas including sustainable agriculture and regional monitoring. Now, Planet has also been selected by the Scottish government. This was the article that I just showed you previously, and this one came out on July 30th. And again, when we look at this article and you look at the headlines and you read through the report and through the press release, you're going to see that connection to artificial intelligence again, because the real value of satellite imagery isn't simply collecting millions of pictures. It's extracting useful information from those pictures. And whether that's agriculture, defense, environmental monitoring, infrastructure, or intelligence, that's exactly the bigger picture that we're looking at when it comes to Planet Lab. And that really shows exactly how all of this ties in with artificial intelligence as well. Now, Planet, they also deployed its Pelican 11 satellite in July, continuing the expansion of its high-resolution Earth imaging capabilities. And financially, Planet's previous quarter showed some impressive growth because the company reported approximately $94 million in revenue, representing around 42% year-over-year growth. And sorry, and bookings from defense and intelligence agencies reported an increase of approximately 65%. And excuse me, of 65%. And the defense number once again caught my attention because we've now seen national security exposure appear across essentially every company that we have discussed. And Planet has also officially scheduled its next earnings report. Their next earnings report is set up for fiscal year 2027, the second quarter after market close on September 3rd, 2026. Now, management will hold the conference call at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's showing 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, but that's another date that I'm going to be watching. So if you see the time change, again, this is Pacific Standard Time. I'm Eastern Standard Time, ET. So when we put all the 5 companies together that we've been talking about, I do think that this is where things become very interesting because these aren't 5 identical specific space companies. Rocket Lab, they give you launch and space systems, while Redwire gives you space infrastructure combined with autonomous defense systems, and Intuitive Machines gives you lunar and communications infrastructure, while Black Sky, they give you real-time geospatial intelligence and AI-enabled analytics. And Planet Labs, they give you massive scale Earth observation and geospatial data. 5 companies with 5 completely different approaches, but they're all participating in the continued commercialization and militarization of space. So that's all I got when it comes to the 5 companies I wanted to talk about today on this channel. Rocket Lab, Lunar, Planet Labs, Black Sky, and Redwire as well. So those are the 5 that we talked about today on this channel. Let me know what it is you think about space stocks, and let me know what it is you want to see in future upcoming videos. And if you did enjoy the content, again, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. And again, if no pressure, but if you do wish to become an actual member of my InvestQ community, please feel free to check out the 2 different memberships that I have, Tier 1 and Tier 2, as all the support I get from you does help the channel grow. But with that being said, guys, stay safe. David over here at InvestQ out, and I'll see you on the next video.